Hi, Victoria. It's so great to see you again.
Yes, once again.
I know we're running a little bit late. We're on the end of March right now, but I did not want to let the month go without talking kind of about where we're at in terms of the market. I know that's probably going to shift again
Mm,
next week, actually. So,
yeah.
what can you tell us about where we are right now?
Uncertainty, uncertainty, uncertainty. Yes, that's kind of where we are. I think a lot of growers, yeah, sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop when it comes to the tariffs and whether April 2nd will turn out to be anything that will be touching agriculture. We're not really sure. My understanding is that what was under CUSMA is going to stay, tariff free. Like that's sort of been put aside, and that the April 2nd deadline was more about reciprocal tariffs and, bouncing around different things like that. So we'll see, though. You never know. Things can change. The auto industry, I think, was pretty surprised with the announcement Wednesday. So again, it could be a surprise. We don't know. So there's a lot of uncertainty there because people are either starting planting, getting ready for planting, or putting those intentions in place. Seed is ordered, in some cases delivered, and so it's a very uncertain time for the growers of what's going to happen if I put these potatoes in the ground, and what's going to happen sort of long term into next season. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think too, as we think about, next week and what happens, we can't even be guaranteed that whatever is said next week is going to be how
right.
it goes as well.
Yeah,
So some
yeah,
things to think about. At the
exactly.
time, last month at this time, or when the last holdings were out, it was sort of like almost business as usual. Not
Yep,
quite, but like
yep,
almost.
yep,
Has that shifted quite substantially now? I know I read that there's been some volume cuts on processing,
yep.
lots in the news right now about some fears. Uh,
Yes, most definitely. I mean, I think the month of March was a bit up and down. The tariffs came on for those 3, 4 days, I think. So the fresh growers that are moving product down into the U.S. really had a difficult time there for those few days. There are regions that have definitely seen the impact, both the lead up to it and those days, and even this uncertainty that continued with this April 2nd date. So yeah, everything from cancellation of loads, postponing of loads. Some has been business as usual. I think domestically things are very good. The fresh market is fairly well in balance when we talk about supply and demand, and the product is moving. And I think to a certain extent, still moving into the U.S.
yeah.
But there's definitely on the eastern part of Canada been impact from the tariffs and all that sort of thing. On the processing sector, as you mentioned, there have been volume cuts. They started in Washington, went into Idaho, and now have been announced in across Canada as well, between Alberta, Manitoba, and even I think New Brunswick. So the contracts themselves aren't necessarily completely negotiated at all yet, but the processors have actually indicated that they will be taking less volume. So it's a big hit to the growers, and not just the first line growers, but also the seed growers. So if the processing grower doesn't have an outlet for those potatoes, is he going to actually plant them, and or her? And if they're not going to plant them, what are they doing about the seed? Are they returning it, canceling their order? So then the seed growers are also highly impacted by that, of course.
Yeah, definitely going back to that uncertain word. That's definitely uncertain. And complicating things. I know we talk a lot about when it comes to the market right now, tariff, 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 obviously. But I'm sitting looking out my window at a foot and a half of snow that arrived 2 days after it was plus 11. And I was thinking about throwing my kayak in the water. I know you're expecting some sort of crazy ice storm.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in BC they were planting. So
Yep.
how much is weather playing a factor in all this as well?
Well, and it's exactly at the start of our conversation today what what was going through in my mind was, normally that's the topic of a conversation right now is weather, and it's there, but it's sort of been on the back burner for most people because of everything else that's happening.
Yeah.
But most certainly erratic weather is still such a big part of what's going to happen. So as you say, BC has already started planting a little bit, and now it been in rain, so everything's kind of at a standstill for them. And everywhere else is getting snow one day, and 2 days later, +5, +10. So it's definitely been difficult. And I was looking also at a chart, really focused more on the prairies in Western Canada on drought. And, that still is a constant issue of do we have enough snowpack? Is there enough water? It seems like we've got a lot of snow, but do we really? And drier conditions that might continue through this growing season again. So, yeah, it's definitely a big part of what's on their mind and whether they're going to be able to get out in their fields. So most people I've talked to seem to be in line with sort of, April, some into May planting.
Yeah.
It's really going to depend on the next few weeks, I guess, of how the weather's going to be. I mean, I have a lot of family members with birthdays in April, and we have had snow mid-April on one of the birthdays in the past. So it's not even that it's out of whack with history,
Yeah.
but yeah. So hopefully the snow type that we get at this time of year doesn't usually last. So I'm crossing my fingers that the fields will be able to dry up and get some warm weather.
That's normally how I feel, but this year it just having shoveled some, it
Yeah.
feels heavier. I had joked earlier about putting my kayak in, but my birthday is April 19th, and my very first thing I do is my kayak goes in the water, even if I'm Titanicking it around the ice that's still on the river.
Yeah.
I still love that, but I was looking at the forecast and it does not look like it's going to get warm enough to melt any of that.
No, exactly. And it's one thing to have the snow melted from the sun, but it's getting those soil temperatures up. And I
Right.
think that's what a lot of growers now are sort of thinking about. And then you get the moisture in the heavier soils, and you can't even get the equipment in the field, and, get the field prepared. And, so
Right.
there's a lot of, a lot of things that they're considering right now. And I think between the weather and the economic situation, there's a lot of unease right now for our growers for sure. Yeah.
Do you think some of those contract negotiations that haven't been completed, do you think is that dependent on what happens on April 3rd, do you think, or is that just like it's just slower because of,
I think they no, I think they've I mean it's difficult for me to speak with any conviction just because
yeah,
I don't get involved with the negotiations.
of course.
From what I understand, the processors have sort of moved forward with there will be tariffs. Rather than the is there, isn't there,
Yeah,
kind of thing. So it's already sort of in the considerations. They are still in negotiations. Everybody has their meetings planned, and they're still having those discussions. So
good.
I would think that, things are getting close in certain regions. Mind you, in the East, they're just getting started, sort of, so it's kind of different timelines. It usually moves from west to east in terms of the negotiations. So we'll
Yeah.
see how things go. Yeah. Yeah.
In the past, it feels like we've been talking about this since January. We've always just said, focus on what you can control, focus, those kinds of things. I imagine that is still almost doubling down on that message.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, really. Yeah, exactly. Focus on and there's there's growers I've talked to. I watched a grower panel at the Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada meetings, and they had some growers up there, and a lot of them really mentioned it. It sort of struck home. Our plan isn't 1 year at a time. Like we have a long term plan. We have a 3 to 5 year plan, and yes, there's a lot happening right now, and we have to still consider what our long term plan is and how we achieve those goals. So yeah, some of them are sort of like, well, we just need to forge ahead and keep moving forward and make the adjustments to our plan as we go with what happens.
I know you just came back from the fruit and vegetable growers annual meeting. Was that sort of the vibe that you got there as well? Is that
Yeah. Like I think that it was very interesting. I mean, there was a lot of talk over the week, obviously, on how FBGC can support the growers and CPC for potatoes, Canadian Potato
Yeah.
Council, how they can advocate for growers and what the growers need. And so there's a lot of discussion through the week on that. And then, as I said at the end, they did this grower panel. It was very, very impactful, in terms of there were some very good questions and some pointed questions, and really some good honest answers that came out of it. And yeah, so part of it was sort of forge ahead. The other part, the really good section I enjoyed was the part on mental health and making sure that in these difficult
Yeah.
times you're talking about it, you're getting the support that you need. Don't feel that you're alone, you're not the only one going through it. Talk to your colleagues, talk to other people. You don't have to share your competitive stuff with your fellow growers, but you can talk about the shared problems or issues or concerns
Yeah.
or whatever. So I was really happy to see that part talked about,
Yeah.
and making sure that people are, it's very difficult times right now, and making sure that people have the support that they need, not just financially but also physically,
And
mentally.
yes, of course. I
Yeah,
went for
it's tough being a farmer.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a very
exactly.
difficult life.
We were talking even internally the other day just about that whole how you can't help but doom scroll. It just is what it is. And so, sort of, what can you do knowing you can't stop yourself from doing that, but mitigating it in some way? Like, how can you sort of shed? And there's some really good kind of action items that I didn't even think about. Even for me, I hiked this weekend to top of a summit where there was not any cell phone service.
Exactly, and that was exactly one of the points that came up within that panel, was making sure you find an outlet, making sure you find, farming is 24/7, and it's difficult to take care of yourself
Yeah.
in that and make time for yourself. And that was one of the things that was very promoted among the panel, was making sure you take a little bit of time. If you have to take a half an hour just to go for a walk and wander around and look at the fields, just from a appreciation of nature perspective, because that was one of the things they said, is that the first advice you get is go take a walk in nature. And they're like, we're in nature all the
Yeah.
time, 24/7. What else can we do? So making sure you find other outlets that go read a book or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, that you're taking care of yourself for a bit of the time, because you can't help others if you're not taking care of yourself. So
Absolutely. Such great advice. When does the next holdings report come out?
exactly. It'll be coming out it's not technically it's the first full week of April.
Okay.
So, because we start April midweek. So, first full week of April. And so that report should be out, for the holdings for April, and we'll get an idea of what the disappearance actually was in March, because that'll be, I think, a key month to seeing where the rest of the potato pile is going to go and how well it's going.
A lot for us to talk about in April, for
I
sure.
think so. Yeah, I think so.
I so appreciate your time. I know you've been going crazy for the last couple of
No,
weeks.
yeah,
So
exactly. No problem. I knew have as well. So now it's like the sort of conference season has calmed down a bit. Growers are more focused on what's happening outside. So yeah, now's the time we can work on those projects and bigger projects. So it's good.
excellent. Well, thank you for your transparency, for your time, for
No
your
problem.
generosity. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.